I have a bit of a weird story from back when I used to work nights at a hospital. For some background on this story, this happened a long time ago. This was back when this particular hospital only had one security guard per shift, and they had them to make sure nothing ever happened, not because something did, if that makes sense. This hospital was fairly small. It only had a few floors, but back then, in the city I lived in, this hospital was the biggest building around. As I said, I was a security guard for the overnight shift, probably because I was the only person that applied for the job. I was a bit of a scrawny kid, a few years out of high school with no formal training, which, again, highlights how serious they were about their security guards. This hospital had a 24/7 visitation policy, which is basically why I had a job. They held a strong policy that was basically that the family and friends of those in the care of the hospital had unfettered rights to visitations. So if you had someone that was in the hospital and you got off work at 4 in the morning, you were allowed to check in and see them. While this seems like a terrible idea, they implemented it well enough. So long as you were on the list of approved people, the nurses would sit down with you and go over everything that had been done in the patient's status. If the patient was awake, they could visit as long as they stayed quiet. Despite this, and as you can probably imagine, working the overnight shift at a hospital was an incredibly do-nothing job. That said, we had a couple of people that had to be asked to leave, but nothing too crazy. Mostly just people loitering or saying things that the nurses weren't too fond of. There was one night, though, that something happened that I still, to this day, cannot explain. It was a night about eventful as the rest of them. Nothing was going on, there were no fires to put out, and the visitor's log included about 3 names over the past 4 hours. I informed the head nurse on duty that I was going to step away from the post for a few moments for a bathroom break and to get some coffee. She agreed to sit at the desk to make sure no one gets in without signing in on the board, and I walk away. I go do my business in the restroom and then take the stairs down to the cafeteria area and put my money in the machine for one of the fancy coffees, which was pretty much just a coffee with chocolate powder. I stir it, I add a little extra milk, and then I head back up. As I'm sitting back at the main desk, I notice that on camera 3, which is the camera for the cafeteria area, there's a guy sitting at one of the tables. He looks fairly normal. He's wearing a polo-style shirt and jeans, and just sitting at the table, staring at nothing in particular. I was a bit confused because I was just down there and didn't see anyone, but I also wasn't being incredibly attentive, so I thought we may have just missed each other. I asked the head nurse if the guy on the camera had signed in. She looked back at me and said that no one had walked in while I was gone. I pointed to the screen and clarified that this guy hadn't walked in while I was away. She confirmed he hadn't come in. It was a bit weird, but I let it go. She walked back to her area and I sat back down to watch the cameras. After a few minutes of just kind of staring at this guy, he looks straight up at the camera and just kind of glares. Honestly, it was a bit creepy. He was seriously just staring at the camera with a blank stare, just holding his gaze. As dumb as it may sound, it almost felt like he was staring at me, not the camera. I call for the head nurse again, and I tell her that I'm going to head down to talk to the guy. I asked her to watch the screen and make sure he didn't walk away. She agrees. I get in the elevator and head down to the seating area in the cafeteria. Much to my surprise, he wasn't there. The entire cafeteria area was completely and totally empty. I did a quick check through the entire area, shined my light into the back of the kitchen, and checked every single side room. There was seriously nobody in the room. The chills I was getting from this were unbearable. The hair on my arms were seriously standing on end. I walked back to the elevator and headed back to the desk. When I got up there, the nurse looked up at me and asked me what was going on. I responded by asking her when he walked away from the table. She said that he hadn't walked away, and then looked back at the screen. At that moment, her face went white as snow. All the color drained, and she looked like she was about to seriously scream. Apparently, she had been watching the screen the entire time, and she said that the guy hadn't moved. She said that she saw me exit the elevator, walk around the room, and check everything, and she thought it was really weird how I seemingly walked right past the guy. She then mentioned that the man was on camera, staring straight at her the entire time, up until she looked away toward me. It was honestly creepy as hell. This guy seemingly did not exist. I saw him clear as day on the screen. She saw him just the same. But when I went down there, he wasn't there. What's worse, I actually got a look at the archived footage the next day, and at no point was this man in the video. I confirmed the time with that head nurse, and he did not exist on the video. I even watched the clip where I was walking around and checking the entire area, but there was no guy there. I don't know if this was some sort of glitch or really freaky anomaly, or maybe it was some kind of ghost that was just being really creepy. But it was honestly the most terrifying thing that happened at that job. Nothing like it ever happened again for the 5 or so years I worked there, and I'm actually pretty thankful for that. A couple of years ago, I was driving myself back to my little hometown in Idaho. My sister was going to be having her first kid, and it was going to be my first niece, so I wanted to be there for her. It was going to be about a 10-hour drive, and I was planning on leaving the following Friday morning since I was off and had the whole day to get there. Unfortunately, I had a maintenance thing come up at my apartment that I had to be there for, and of course, when you're given a time frame of 4 hours, they will show up in those last 30 minutes, then take another 2 hours to complete it. Because of this, I ended up leaving around 6 or 7 that night. I was pissed, but decided I would still head out that night. That way I could get there early, crash for a few hours, and be good to go. So I got my stuff in my car and headed out. Because I had planned this in advance, I already had a couple bottles of water, energy drinks, and snacks ready to go. It was about mid-October, so the weather was great to just have the windows cracked, music blaring, and enjoying the ride. The view was pretty nice too, and there wasn't too much traffic at that time, so I was in a good state of mind. Unfortunately, I started crashing around 1 or 2 a.m. I didn't want to stop because I knew I only had a few hours left, but it was a struggle. I had finished off my energy drinks, rolled the windows down more, hoping the chillier air would keep me awake, but nothing was working. I know how dangerous it can be driving when you're tired and on the highway on top of that, so I decided to stop at a hotel to sleep for the night. I drive a tiny 2-door coupe, so it's not exactly comfortable to lean the seat back and sleep. Otherwise, I would have just done that. I look for the hotel signs and get off the exit for the first one I see. It was a little old looking from the outside. I don't remember the name of it, as it wasn't one of the bigger chains either. I just thought as long as the door locked and it wasn't too badly priced, I'll stay. I didn't need anything other than a bed. I got out, grabbed my bag, and headed in. The lobby was a bit eerie. It was dimly lit with a single couch and table area, and the desk had what appeared to be bulletproof glass around it. It also smelled musty, like it hadn't been used in years. Even the carpet looked ancient with its dark red theater-looking pattern. As I approached the desk and saw that it was empty, I noticed the door behind the desk that was slightly open, and I heard faint talking, like it was coming from a TV. There was no bell or any way to get someone's attention, so I just said, "Hello?" and waited. I heard the talking get quieter and someone coming out of the room. It was a frail older guy wearing what I think was something like long johns in a robe. He wasn't rude or anything, but he also wasn't very polite. But maybe that's because I was there at 2 a.m. and I was interrupting his show. He said good morning, asked how long I was staying, gave me my room key, and told me the quiet hours and that no smoking was allowed. I thanked him and walked off down the hallway. I got to my room, which made me realize I definitely got what I wanted. It looked just as old in the rooms as it did in the lobby. Same red carpet, mustard yellow curtains and bedding, and the same musty smell. The air just felt still in there, so I quickly turned on the AC to get the air flowing. I sat my bag and purse down in the chair and went to the bathroom first. While I was in there, something just felt off. It was like that sense you get when you're being watched. I figured it was just me being on edge because I was tired and in a place I wasn't familiar with. So I splashed water on my face, changed into my pajamas, and got into bed. As I was laying there, though, that feeling would not go away. I tried just falling asleep and ignoring it, but unlike in the car, I now was unable to. That's when I started hearing things. I couldn't really tell at first what it was, but it was really quiet, like it was either a muffled TV or someone whispering. Trying to be reasonable, I was thinking it was just someone with the TV on too loud in the next room, so I tried ignoring it. I think because of the situation, though, I started getting annoyed and actually smacked the wall a few times, hoping they'd get the hint. It appeared they did as it got quiet, so I tried to focus on sleeping again. Not long after, I started hearing more noises, but this made me jump as it actually sounded like someone whispering in my room. I quickly turned on the light and looked around and didn't see anything. Now that I'm spooked, I turned on the TV to have some of my own sound to try and help. Unfortunately, the whispering kept up. It wasn't constant, but I could hear it, and it all just sounded mumbled. I could never make out anything. Until the end, when it sounded like it was right behind me, and it said, "It hurts," and it made me jump again. I looked behind me towards the door, and I just saw a dark figure. It looked like a child, or maybe a young woman. I quickly turned on the light, and it was gone. Now, I know I turned on the air, but it was just the fan, so the air was moving, but it was freezing in that room. I went and looked at the unit thinking maybe I did turn on the AC, but it was still on fan. I turned it off since it had gotten so cold in there, and then I turned on all of the lights, turned the TV louder, and tried to forget about it all. It wasn't much longer when I started feeling something at the edge of my bed. I again tried to rationalize that it was something like the comforter moving or falling, until it started feeling more like someone grabbing my foot. That was it for me. I grabbed my stuff, ran out of that room in my pajamas still, and noticed the room that I thought the TV sounds were coming from was actually just a janitor's closet or supply room. I walked past the front desk, and the room in the back was now dark, but I kept going. I tossed my stuff in my passenger seat as I got in and locked my doors. If I would have known that that was going to happen, I would have just tried to sleep in my car. I couldn't shake the weird feeling just being in the parking lot, so I left. I didn't even care about the money. I didn't feel right trying to explain I wanted a refund because I saw a ghost, so I just ate it. I drove further down to a 24-hour McDonald's and slept in my car for a few hours. I used the restroom to change into clothes, grabbed a large coffee, and headed back out. When I got to my sister's, I told her all about it, and she believed it. She's very into the paranormal, so she enjoyed the story, but me, not so much. I wanted to look into the history of that hotel, but I couldn't remember the name of it. One of the times I go over there again, I have to try and find it for her, but it will be during the day, and I promise you, I will not be staying there. I've been doing this for as long as I can remember. I have run into some really weird, funny, and even some pretty creepy situations over the years. It's not as easy driving an SUV because some people don't know how to respect the spacing of big rigs, which alone can cause stress. Then there are the times that you can end up in strange places that you're not familiar with and possibly some really weird people. Especially nowadays, people are unpredictable. That being said, I can usually handle people being strange. It's the unexplained that really racks my brain and puts me in a frenzy. Yep, I believe in a lot of cryptids and paranormal because we can't really explore that kind of thing. And there are still tons of things out there that haven't been discovered and identified, so it's entirely possible that they exist, right? That being said, I do watch and follow a lot of podcasts, and I make notes of the ones that are about the area that I may be driving through as a way to check it out myself. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be a tad bit freaked out about going to see them, though. Here are a few that I have come across that were some of the creepiest for me. So, I had a delivery in West Virginia, and with how I drive, I tend to be earlier than needed. Because of this, I can't really do anything till then but sleep, so instead of wasting what free time I was going to have, I decided to find somewhere to sit down and eat instead of fast food. I ended up finding a little barbecue place, so I sat in, tried seeing if there were any places of interest nearby, but didn't look into too much as I was already getting tired. I decided to go ahead and leave so I can find a place to stop overnight and try looking around the next day. Apparently, my truck didn't agree, and something ended up breaking on it not even an hour into my drive. So I pulled over to check out what happened. Thankfully, it wasn't too major, however, I didn't have the tools to fix it, so I called dispatch, who got in contact with our insurance company, who was going to send someone out to help. Unfortunately, they were an hour out, so I had some time to kill. Since it was going to be a while, I started laying out the reflective triangles behind my truck. While I was doing this, I started to hear talking. It was very faint, but enough to make me look around. I didn't see anyone though, but it would start and stop again several times. As I looked around, I noticed the fencing on the opposite side of the road with some interesting looking trees. Something was different about them. They looked old, unkempt and like they had stories to tell. So I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of them. As I did, I noticed what looked like a person standing under one of the trees. My phone wasn't the best, so when I tried zooming in, I couldn't see much, so I got in my truck to grab my camera. As mentioned, I like going to so-called haunted places when I can, so I got myself a decent camera. As I went back to take more pictures, the person was gone. This got me a little more curious, so I crossed the road and approached the fence line. Once there, I started getting some more pictures when I saw the person under the tree again. They were watching me. Something definitely felt off, but I'm stupid enough, so I walked to the fence line to get a closer look. As I did, I started hearing laughing. Children laughing. I again was looking around to see if I could see anything, but there were no children in sight. But this figure was still under the tree, but has moved now to face me. Getting a bit closer, I can tell it's a person. A small child, to be exact. She was wearing a dress with long, straight hair. I took a few more pictures when I heard the laughing even closer now, seeing nothing. The fact that the laughing was getting closer, even though I was moving, did throw me off. I took one more look at the kid under the tree and tried calling out to it. I think I said, like, "Do you need help?" or something like that, when it turned to face away from me. At that time, the laughing sounded like it was right next to me, as I felt a tug at my leg. Yeah, so at that point, I saw all I needed and started sprinting back to my truck as fast as I could. Once there, I locked my doors and started looking at the pictures I took. To no surprise, there were no kids in the photos, but a lot of lights and orbs surrounding the tree. That was enough for me to feel uneasy, so I tried doing something else to occupy my mind till the help arrived. I ended up dozing off and woke up to a tapping on the passenger window. I thought it was the help, but to my horror, it was the face of a child. It was a boy. He looked wet, and his face almost looked like it was waterlogged. I may have yelled some expletives and threw something at the window. After catching my breath and calming down, I opened up my door to look around when someone started pulling up behind me. Thankfully, it was the roadside assistants, so they helped me out and I left as soon as I could. That night, I found a well-lit stop and stayed there, but I don't think I slept much. I called my brother the next day and told him about what had happened, as he loves this stuff too, and he started looking into the place to find out more information. Turns out, I wasn't too far from an abandoned amusement park that had several kids die there. One boy had actually drowned in the lake there that had boat rides. After learning this, it creeped me out even more. But now we are making plans to go back to visit the entire site and find out more about the place. Another experience doesn't have a good background, but is equally terrifying. I had arrived at the drop-off location a few hours before they were open, so I decided to sleep while waiting. While sleeping, I started hearing barking. Thinking it was just someone walking by with a dog, I waited for it to taper off, but after a while, it wasn't stopping and was actually getting closer. So maybe it was a stray dog in the area. It got annoying though, so I thought I would open the door real fast, yell at it, and scare it off. However, when I opened the door, I didn't see a dog. I looked around and saw a few feet in front of my truck the source of the barking. This didn't look like a dog. This thing looked like a human standing on all fours and barking. but the spine was so arched that it looked too long to be a human or a dog. That's when the barking stopped and it started standing straight up. It was easily 9 feet tall, maybe more. I jumped back into the truck and turned the lights on to see it better when it jumped out of the light and appeared to climb over the side of the building. I have never seen anything like that, and it scared the hell out of me. That one I don't care to look into because that was not a ghost and it was bigger than me, so I'll leave that one alone. I've been a nurse at our local hospital for the last 8 years. If you're here long enough, you'll come across a few ghost stories, maybe even experience one yourself. I definitely had my share since being there. I can name a few that were especially memorable. I will start by saying that it doesn't help that the hospital used to be an orphanage many, many years ago as well. So the main one we hear about is the children of death. We call them this because when a patient sees one of these kids, they end up passing away soon after. A couple of examples was one gentleman that another nurse walked in on as he was talking to someone, but there was no one in the room. The nurse asked him who he was talking to, and he said the young girl that just left. He said she had brought in a card, and he pointed at it. The nurse said she looked at it, and it looked like a young child's drawing of a person surrounded by flowers and people crying. We had no idea where it came from, as he hadn't had any visitors that day. We even checked the logs, and his son came to see him the day prior, but no one today, and his son didn't have any young kids. A few days later, the man passed away in his sleep. He was there due to a heart attack, but he seemed to have been improving. Another instance was an older lady that was there after breaking her hip. She said she was a medium, so she was always entertaining us nurses on duty. She gave us all readings and told some interesting stories of past readings she had done. Every once in a while, she might ask to pass condolences on to someone there that recently lost someone, be it another patient or even our head nurse once. Her father had died suddenly, and we, the nurses, didn't really talk much about it, but this lady had brought it up. I thought she must have heard someone mentioning it. However, there was one instance where we received a nurse call to her room, and upon entering, she asked that we check on the woman across the hall. She claimed she saw her walk out of the room holding the hand of a little girl, geriatric ward. This was in the geriatric ward, so the patient didn't have a heart monitor attached, and she was bedridden because she was very frail and couldn't get up on her own. We dashed over to her room to see she had passed. We were shocked because while we were expecting that she would pass soon, we had no idea when, nor did we know how this other patient would have known. She couldn't have left her room, and there were no kids on this floor. So of course, we had to go back and ask her about it. She said the lady looked spry and happy and believed the little girl was helping her move on to the afterlife. We thought at first maybe it was one of the children other patients have seen, but she said she was wearing modern clothing, a pink flowery dress with a huge flower in her hair. We thought it was a crazy situation, but we let it go. Later on, after the older woman's daughter came in to get her mom's belongings, the medium was being wheeled back to her room by another nurse when she stopped this daughter to speak to her. After giving her condolences for her mother's passing, she brought up that she saw her as she passed over and began asking her, the daughter, about her own daughter. She started crying and was shocked that she had brought it up. Apparently, her daughter had died after being hit by a car while riding her bike a few years prior. She said she was buried in her favorite pink floral dress with a matching flower clip. She also said that her daughter and her mom became very close as she was her first grandkid, and when they lost her, it broke her heart. I thought maybe she recognized this woman from the news or something, but how could she have known what she was wearing when she was buried? I don't much believe in mediums, but the fact that this little girl this woman appeared to be walking out of the room with matched her granddaughter made me a little less skeptical. So that, my friends, was another collection of our classic paranormal stories. I really like these just because there are so many different explanations that people come up with. But I also like the ones like with the woman seeing the granddaughter, because they don't always have to be creepy. Some of them are just kind of interesting to hear and kind of in a bittersweet way. I think overall, though, I'd rather experience a ghost or a spirit other than a creepy person. But that's just me. What about you guys? Which would you prefer? And as always, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And with that being said, friends, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. And until next time, take care.